This is it. Okay. Can you guys see the slide there? Okay, awesome. So yeah, I heard about a lot about like the digital user testing, and we actually ended up doing kind of a sprint because we had a bunch of in-person tests scheduled right when COVID hit. So that was kind of unfortunate. So we really had to just pivot all of our testing virtual pretty fast. So basically, like the big three things that were different from in-person to online was that we had people that were testing on our computers with pre-downloaded software, and we had to make the transition to having these users download all the softwares that we had on our computers themselves, which the logistics of turned out to be pretty difficult. We also had to solve the problem of having like being able to sit next to a user and watch their gameplay and trying to make that remote. And the last thing for us was having our users take anonymous surveys and everything, which we usually just did with pen and paper. We were able to just kind of like turn our backs. So that was kind of like, those were the three things that we had really had to solve. And we ended up being able to transition online, but we learned a lot. So we did this virtual testing session over a couple weeks, and then we just tested it all and actually completed it last week. So I learned a lot of what to do and what not to do when you're pivoting your testing to online. So the first thing was in finding users. So for us, recruiting in person was a little bit different than recruiting remotely. For us, when we were finding users, we had luckily done a customer discovery round before, and I'm sure a lot of you have done user interviews. I think that's actually the best resource for if you want like teacher or counselor testers, is to just reach back out to them. And the other thing that was really helpful for us was making it as easy as possible for people to share your opportunity. So for us, that was just like putting in a Calendly link and then making the ask like totally forwardable. And we put it in any newsletter that we could find. So we put it in like different incubator newsletters that we had been a part of. You can put it in newsletters of people that are honestly in this cohort that may have similar audiences to you. I think for youth, it was actually really helpful for us to ask for referrals from teachers and counselors, because they had classrooms of kids that were sitting at home and didn't really have too much to do. So that was actually a good way to do it. And we found most of our youth testers through social skills and support group coordinators, as well as teachers who just like blasted the word out to all their students who are teenagers. So it worked out really well. So yeah, my biggest tips for like finding users was definitely asking for referrals on and following up on every single one of like your testers that you test with, because they each know a lot more, and making it super easy for people to forward that call for testers or that opportunity. The other big thing for us was like prepping users. So that whole idea of like users having to download any of the software technology that you're using to test with them. So whether they have to download your digital product or your app, making sure you can do that in advance and you make that process as easy as possible for them. So for us, that meant a couple of things. Before we even like sent out downloads or any types of links to softwares for things, we actually tested out our entire testing process. So we got a bunch of friends and family together, and the first thing we did was just bug tested our product or service. I think that was super important to do before we even sent download links out of our product. The second thing we did was test the actual process. So I actually got two of my best friends to go through the entire testing process, from like the first email that you would give to a recruited tester all the way to like the follow-up survey. And we caught a lot of like logistical bugs in there. So that's a super good thing to do maybe a week or two before you actually test people. I think user prep was super important. So we tried to automate everything we could in terms of the user prep process. We linked all the instructions down to downloads. And the last thing that was really helpful for us was like users the users that you're testing with, a lot of the time they will just like, they'll get this email to prep in their inbox, and they just won't read through the whole thing. So you just have to check in 1 to 3 times before your testing session to make sure they have all the necessary components downloaded. I think that was the toughest part for us. So I just started offering my phone number to people, and most of the time that was the most effective way to get people to actually have their stuff done beforehand. But even despite that, some people will just not read your prep emails or even listen to your calls and stuff. So the biggest thing we learned was just to build in at least 10 minutes of buffer time with every one of your testing sessions remotely. Um, there was one time where one of our families, like we have a desktop product, and told them to download Skype on their desktop very specifically. And she came onto Skype with her phone and didn't have Skype at all downloaded on her computer. So we had to like walk her through how to download Skype onto her computer and also how to download the game. So that was a lot, but we had an extra 10 minutes to do that. And I guess the last tip, or the last big thing about the digital testing process that I didn't realize until we actually tested out, was that it's super awkward. I think that when you're testing with people in person, you have like the ride up the elevator and the walk into the office to have small talk with people and kind of warm them up. And you don't have that with digital testing. Typically, you're just on a computer, you get on the call, and you get right down to business. But what we've learned is that warm up is super important to have, especially in these online calls, and especially when you have not previously met your tester. So making sure you build time into your testing protocol for a warm up and a little bit of just like chit chat was super important for us. The other thing is that, like, if, for example, if a tester is like screen sharing an app or a game with you, you're not going to be on the screen the entire time, and they're not going to know that you're watching them. So just acknowledging audibly that you're there, and like if they're making a choice or if you're curious about something, like continuously talking to them was really important, because if we were silent, like we had actual testers being like, hey, are you still there? Are you on the line? What's going on? So that was important for us to hear. And then the last thing was have your Slack with your team open while you're digitally testing. We had a family who was testing with like a 5-year-old laptop and a bunch of programs running. So while they were screen sharing the gameplay with us on Skype, it was super jittery, and it was just really bad, to the point where it made me super dizzy. So I had to actually like message my teammates on Skype to take over stealthily while I went and laid down, because things like that are just unexpected can happen. So yeah, those are the things that I would share about digital testing. And if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer.